So what we need to do is create an incentive policy through our tax policy so that businesses will stay here. And not like we've done in the past. We need to learn from what we've done in the past. For example, Fidelity. We created all these tax incentives for Fidelity to expand their operations here in Massachusetts, and it was set, a window was set. As soon as the tax window, that break broke down, they were coming to the end of that tax break, they started moving their workers to New Hampshire. Bad policy, because what you've done now is that you got a quick flip out of it, but now you've inconvenienced all these workers that have probably bought homes in the area and have moved here. Now they're being relocated or losing their jobs because they don't want to drive to New Hampshire. You need to create a tax policy where people are able to, the companies are able to, they're rewarded for buying, expanding jobs and employing people here in Massachusetts. So, for example, one of the things you can do is take the unemployment tax, your workman's comp taxes. The longer that somebody stays on the payroll, they would enjoy a tax holiday. One of the other things that we can do is one of the other things that we've done is by saying, okay, if somebody goes over X amount of hours, then you have the healthcare, penalties start kicking in and all of that. So what that has done is that's forced companies to, number one, make people, part-time,
right.
Contract 1099 employees, and limited people's hours so that they can't get benefits like those of us that are full-time employed. And that's bad for many, many reasons. So what you need to do is create the incentive. So instead of saying we're going to penalize you if you have a full-time employee, we need to create incentives to say, look, we want you to hire full-time employees. We want you to stay in Massachusetts. We want you to expand. And we're going to reward you quarter after quarter, year after year for doing that. And, people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? When you offer, Ronald Reagan was the greatest president in demonstrating this point. You cut taxes, creates more revenue. When I was in the House of Representatives with Governor Weld, we went in and cut taxes, all kinds of taxes. And we didn't lose revenue. We actually raised revenue. Because what happens is, Sharon, if you have $50 more in your pocket a week, you're going to spend a portion of that. Hopefully not all of it, but you're going to spend a portion of that. Now, when you spend a portion of that, you go out to dinner, there's a meals tax. You go out and you might buy a new car, gas. You're going to get, the state's going to get back revenue in all those areas. So it's better for you to spend that money. And what happens if you're going out to dinner? That's helping a local restaurant. If you go out and you buy, that's helping a local store, retail center. So you're going to be putting the money back in the economy how Sharon chooses to, not how Beacon Hill chooses. So there are many ways that we can do that. We have to keep the businesses here, and we need to create an environment by restructuring our entire bureaucratic system. You think about a business that's trying to locate and open in Massachusetts. Let's take Billerica, for example. Billerica has tons of local laws and local ordinances. You've got to go to the Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, the Board of Selectmen, just to get your business open. Then you have to go through all the state regulatory agencies. And then you have all the federal regulatory agencies. So by the time somebody looks at all that, I'm going to drive 20 minutes. My people will drive to New Hampshire. Much easier to open a business. I can be open in 6 months where it would probably take me a year and a half in Massachusetts. So we need to streamline that and eliminate a lot of the duplication. You don't need 3 levels of government trying to get you to file a business license. And today with electronics, if they file on the local level shares that with the state and they send it off to the federal government instead of having to fill out 3 different applications. So there's a lot of things like that we can do to make it easier for businesses, and so that they don't have to be hiring compliance officers just to be filling out public paperwork. Okay. It's just counterproductive.
All right, thank you.
Take a breath.
I know, exactly. All right, we'll give you a chance now.
Sure, thanks. The problem with the economy in Massachusetts is that it's so expensive to live in Massachusetts, to do business in Massachusetts. And over the last 4 years, taxes have gone up 8 times, $1 billion. We've lost 100,000 jobs in the last 3.5 years. In fact, over between 1998 and 2008, in that period of time, our job creation has been flat. We've created 0 net new jobs. We've had more speakers of the House indicted than we have jobs created in that period of time. So I think that shows a big problem. And that's why Chief Executive Magazine says we're the 47th out of 50th state friendly to do business with. And we need to change that culture. And part of the culture is that we're the 5th highest per capita tax burden in the United States of America. So I think we have to do a few things. I believe in a 5-5-5 tax policy. You need to lower the income tax to 5%, lower the sales tax to 5%, lower the business tax to 5%. This will help in a couple different ways. First of all, businesses dealing with the sales tax are at a disadvantage right out of the gate to New Hampshire that has no sales tax. So that will help keep dollars in Massachusetts. Many sole proprietorships, S-corps, LLCs all pay income tax. So if you lower the burden there, that allows more money to go be reinvested into the business and create jobs, hopefully. We need to simplify the business regulations. You have to wait 6 and 8 months to get a license to operate in Massachusetts, and in business time that's a long time, and it's further delaying your recovery. So I think that needs to change. Licensing and certification is a nightmare. We have 100 different boards that oversee 1,000 different licenses, and it's a bureaucratic mess. That needs to change. We need to change how unemployment is done, and I think we need to reward those companies with lower assessments who have steady employment and less turnover, and those that are a revolving door, those companies that consistently lay off and fire employees, they need to be paying a higher share of the unemployment insurance. I think we need to remove anti-privatization laws to make Massachusetts more competitive. We have PLAs that are in place, and they end up costing, there's a sense of 12% more than opening up. It eliminates 80% of companies being able to bid on public projects. UMass just did UMass Boston just did an expansion, $750 million expansion, and because it was a PLA, it cost them an extra $100 million, not opening up to the free market to bid on it. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And I think the other thing, removing barriers and anti-competition, is getting rid of the Pacheco law. It's for the strictest anti-privatization law in the state. It's been in place since 1993. And the state could certainly, this could help business and certainly help lower the cost of doing government by privatizing, highway maintenance, fleet management, IT infrastructure, and different things like that. And finally, I think we need to continue to do economic target areas. In Billerica, we've done economic target areas to help bring companies into Billerica. AMD Serrano, Nevera Fuel Cells, Paraxel, Pharmalucents. This is just a few that I've helped by recognizing economic target areas in Billerica. And I think we need to continue to do that statewide. So I think those are some concrete things that we need to do. We've got to change the culture. It's hard to make an argument to come to Massachusetts and do business when you can go right over the border in Nashua and New Hampshire and do things a lot cheaper.
And I think we've seen that increase recently.
Certainly have, and everyone goes and shops in New Hampshire because again, it's a failed tax policy that Massachusetts has.
Well, a big cost of doing business, and I think you both touched on it a little bit, is health insurance for employees. That's a huge factor, and it's only becoming more burdensome to business right now. And also, not just to business, but to government. And we're seeing it's exponentially increased for government in recent years. What can we do about that? There was the push for plan design, which is what the state has. The state can decide on its own what to offer employees. Local government cannot. I mean, that hasn't gone anywhere. It's basically died up there. And now municipalities are trying to push their own home rule petitions to get this across. Is this something you'd support, would not support? What would you do if you were up there at this point? And then we'll move on to the business factor with health insurance.
Sure. So
Do you want to start?
You want me to talk strictly to the municipality?
Yes, first we'll focus.
Well, I think, being selected, I've seen our budgets grow and grow and grow for healthcare, and it's a devastating problem. I think we have to allow cities and towns to join the GIC without union votes. You can have all of your municipal unions except for one wanting to join the GIC right now, and the town can't do it. You got to let the managers manage. You got to let the mayors make decisions that financially benefit the taxpayers in the town payroll and keeping costs down. So I think I would absolutely support going to allowing cities and towns going into the GIC. I also think that we need to make sure that municipal retirees have Medicare as their primary source of insurance for when they retire. And this will save tremendous money in the long run as well. And then we can go back to private business too.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
A couple things, just on the whole healthcare issue. Massachusetts implemented the universal healthcare and demonstrates that it doesn't work. Everybody that I know has seen, particularly in this recent year, healthcare costs going up dramatically. I think on average, most of them have gone up like 20%. So the theory of insuring more people will bring down healthcare costs doesn't work. The other thing is the free care death pool, which is those people that are uninsured going into a hospital that need medical care. That number's gone up by 17%. So that goes to show you that if you offer free insurance to everybody, not everybody's going to take it. You're still going to have those people going in, and it didn't bring down that cost, it drove it up. And when you look at if you go to the healthconnector.org, the state website, and you look at any of the private sector, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Tufts, Fallon, any of those, and you look at the costs of those policies are far more pricey than you would probably hear at the Lowell Sun. The story that was in the Lowell Sun today sort of mischaracterized my opinion on the issue of cities and towns forcing unions into the GIC. What I said was that I do support cities and towns being able to go into the GIC. The union issue would tread very carefully with, because those are collective bargaining agreements. And if you turn around and you force the unions without the union consent to go into the GIC, what you will see are the unions suing the cities and towns. What that will do, those are expensive lawsuits. They'll end up going up probably to the state Supreme Court, if not further. So while the city or town might experience a temporary, they'll probably get a stay, so it won't ever happen. But let's just assume they don't get that, and they end up going into the GIC. What will happen is you're going to take all of the savings and pay lawyers to defend the town against that move. So it's best for cities and towns to work with the unions to try to get them to understand why it needs to happen, what the benefits are to them. And the union leaders need to take the responsibility and be realistic at the economy that we're facing and talk their members into doing that, rather than saying you're forced to do it. I'll guarantee you'll see lawsuits up and down the Commonwealth.
But if you can't get the union leaders to agree, and a lot of them haven't thus far, so I'm not sure what the change will be. Things are pretty dire right now.
Well, then they lose members, because you have to then start laying off to be able to meet the rising costs of the insurance.
Then we lose services, kids lose teachers.
But that's on the union. That's on the union's shoulders. I mean, they have to do that. I mean, there's the basic premise here, Sharon. There is no place out. They can talk about taxing soda, like New York charging you a tax if you get some cream cheese smeared on your bagel. You could try all those stupid things, but as Massachusetts saw last year when they went from 5% to 6.25%, add all the taxes you want, your revenue will go down, because people don't have the money. Now, Marc, with this 555, that sounds great, but given the credit crunch and the amount of how people are struggling financially, lowering them now 1.25 cents is not going to get us anywhere. You need to cut the taxes dramatically. I'm supporting the 3%, cutting them back to 3%. That puts more money in your pocket. I've heard people when I'm knocking on doors saying that they're counting quarters to go get gas to get back and forth to work. People are hurting. Now, I just talked to knocking on doors yesterday. Somebody said that their health care insurance policy has gone up by $800. So she's going to drop her health care insurance because she can't afford. That's going to impact her take-home money. And that, she has kids, so she can't afford it. So now what she's going to do is apply for Mass Health and drop her company policy. So people are really counting pennies here. So that's not going to save it. Now, if the union leaders don't want to do it in the existing contracts, then that has to be the major focus for the town managers in the next union negotiation to get people to do that. But I think that the union, I have confidence in the union leadership, that they're supposed to be brotherhoods, sisterhoods, that they're supposed to be watching out for their members. That they'll have to do the right thing. And I think that if the town leaders, selectmen and city councils and mayors sit down with the unions and explain to them the difference and how it it really helps save tax dollars, which helps save jobs, they should do the right thing. If not, then the consequences fall where they may. But, I mean, you could turn around and pass legislation, and it's sort of funny, because we say on one level, we don't want the state jamming stuff down our throats on the local level, but then we want the state to pass legislation that forces gyms, the state insurance down the union's throats. So it's sort of hypocritical, and it will result in massive lawsuits that will cost the cities and towns. And cities and towns don't have money.
And it wouldn't necessarily just be the GIC. I mean, the possibility is you could just design your own without joining the GIC. They would just, the managers, the councils, the boards of selectmen, whomever, would simply look at, these are what we're offering you. You can pick from these 3 HMOs, these 3 PPOs. And
that's right, then you're offering more competition,
right.
And then they'll all sharpen their pencil. And that's why I think the Congress missed a huge opportunity by allowing, there's like 1,300 companies in the United States that sell healthcare insurance. They didn't take out that restriction that they can't compete across state lines. If you turned around and you said, look, we're going to allow 1,300 companies in the United States to compete in every single state in the country, you'd see Blue Cross Blue Shields and and the Tufts and all of them sharpening their pencils, because they don't want a company from Nebraska to come in here to Massachusetts and take away some of their market share. So people will do it. But you're right. I mean, if you offer more options, it will end up saving money in other areas. But I don't support the state jamming something else down the throat, even the state down the throats of unions.
Sure, if I may just jump in.
Yep.
I disagree with Brian on this, because allowing the cities and town choosing to go into the GSE isn't forcing them to do that. Allowing them to design a plan isn't forcing them to do that. But what it does give is the management of the community to decide whether they want to do it. Look, in the private sector, my employer decides what my plan is going to be, and I get to decide what plan I want to go into. My health insurance went up $180 per pay period this year. So I know the costs are rising, but I think you have to give management the ability to make that decision. And if lawsuits come, then lawsuits come, because sometimes in the cities and towns may find out that it's going to be upheld in court. The reality is it's the right thing to do. If one union doesn't want to go along, it's not going to happen. I was talking to somebody in Arlington, and they had every union on board except one union, and it was part of a whole package of a contract that was going to negotiate it, because if one union said no, it threw out a whole slew of months of bargaining, and they couldn't go in and save the taxpayers money and save the employers money. So I think cities and towns absolutely have to have the right to be able to design their own plans. Now when it comes to business healthcare, I think there's a couple things that we need to do. One, allowing individuals to purchase plans over state line is absolutely the way to go. Let me find a plan that fits my needs. I don't need the state telling me what I need covered in my life. I don't need to have every different aspect of the state regulation to cover me. They just don't apply to me, yet I have to pay the consequences when I find a premium to make sure that all the things that they mandate are covered. So let me go shop over state lines. Let me find a plan that works for me. And as was mentioned, that's going to certainly drive competition into the healthcare market. Further driving competitions, if we force providers to publicly disclose what their prices are for services, that will allow patients and insurance companies to know what costs are at different providers. It will allow me to say, you know what, Dr. Smith is charging me $500 more for an MRI than Dr. Jones, and I'm going to end up paying for that. So I'm going to go to this doctor instead of this doctor. Having that public opening of costs is certainly going to help. And then one thing we can also do around healthcare, and I think we need to explore this, is if we take, and this kind of goes back to government and statewide, if we take the mass health participants, put them into more of a managed care plan, word is that could save millions and millions of dollars. So I'd certainly be open to look into that. And so if we're managing health and we're not saving emergency room visits for a sniffle, that might change the cost of healthcare across the state.
That would save a lot of money
sure
to
would.
not have a lot of ER visits.
My wife works at a hospital. She's a nurse, and she sees things, sees people firsthand using the ER as a doctor's office and a walk-in clinic, and it's just the wrong use. And who ends up paying for it are the taxpayers, because either they don't pay, or they're not covered, or they are mass health. and we're paying for it, and it's backing up emergency rooms, and it's making hospitals more expensive to operate with staff. It's a disaster.
Yeah, I just agree with Mark on a couple of points. When you talk, we just got through talking about eliminating more regulations for businesses, and most insurance companies are all private sector companies. One of the things that constantly blows my mind is that every time I go to the doctors, I get probably 4 or 5 letters with how much the doctors charge and what the plans cover are, because these are all public disclosures that are required. That's all raising the cost of doing business. Now, where does that cost get borne? It gets borne by your premium. Most of the cost for healthcare today is all back office stuff because of all of the government regulations, the reporting, the HIPAA, and all that other stuff that between the state and federal government already require. Now you start trying to, insurance companies having to send out market statistics on what your doctor's charging versus somebody else. That's more bureaucracy, more cost, premiums will have to be absorbing that somewhere. If you're going to be trying, if the state's going to turn around and say to cities and towns that, that you can go into the GIC, whether or not you have a union agreement, you are going to, cities and towns are going to either do it or they're not going to do it. I mean, it makes no, I would venture to say, if you say that you can skirt the whole collective bargaining process, then you're going to end up with lawsuits. And Marc, you're a selectman, and you know that the town manager just hired a building inspector. And what happened? The union filed a lawsuit. So the lawsuits are inevitable. And I mean, you look at any one of the lawsuits. In fact, that was one of the big issues that was for the Supreme Court Justice Kagan in her congressional hearings about the firefighter lawsuit that she litigated. I mean, those cases end up going all the way up to the Supreme Court. They're huge issues, and it will cost. You can say, well, they sue, you have a lawsuit, so be it. Those are huge costs to the taxpayers, and you want to try to avoid it. One of the ways to do it in Arlington, you bring up Arlington, great. They got all those unions to agree to do it, then you do it. You got one union to hold out, then you continue to negotiate with them, and they have to give up something, because that's the whole idea about collective bargaining.
You can't do it because all unions have to agree before you can implement anything.
But if the law, if you're dealing with the healthcare insurance, and you have all these other unions, you say, okay, we've got this and we've got the cost savings, but this one union, let those unions put the pressure on them and continue to work with them, and then look at other areas. But to say that you're not going to do it, or you're not, just we're going to allow a lawsuit. There's no money. Cities and towns have no money. The state has no money, and we don't want to do anything. And the other thing is that you got to be careful about collective bargaining. I mean, those are sort of sacred things. And if you have a contract and you can't honor that contract, then it's not worth the paper it's written on. And that's where leadership comes into play.
Okay. All right, thank you. Do you want a quick rebuttal to that?
I would just say, I think,
And then we know what
I think
this issue-
municipalities backing down from a lawsuit, from a threat of lawsuit, is not the reason not to pursue something that's certainly going to save the taxpayers money. But ultimately, if a lawsuit comes, and it may work its way through the channels, and it may be upheld by the cities and towns, but just because a lawsuit's threatened doesn't mean you don't take on something that's the right thing to do, to allow managers to manage their community.
Well,
I'm not saying a lawsuit is. I'm just saying that that's what you know what's.
but a lawsuit can always be threatened. It's always possible.
Exactly.
Anyone can file. So, but we're going to move on from this issue. Casinos have been a big issue also in the state. We have New Hampshire also looking at it. We could very well end up with one on the border of Massachusetts there. We already have millions of Massachusetts dollars going to Rhode Island, to Connecticut, but this issue got nowhere. Where do you stand on it? Do you think we should have casinos? Do you think we should have slots? Where are you at?
I think that, first of all, the casino debate that we've had in Massachusetts shows firsthand how Beacon Hill is broken and doesn't work. When you have a Speaker of the House who can completely flip the debate upside down and put the debate on halt and hold the Senate hostage and even hold the governors hostage because he wants slot parlors in his district, that shows what Beacon Hill is broken. It shows that leadership is broken and they're not working for the people. It was an absolute shame that they couldn't get a bill out and voted on and having something in the works. I support casino gambling. I support resort casinos. I think that's the way to go. they bring real jobs. Even in a down economy, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, that's just Connecticut, ignoring Rhode Island, employ over 15,000 people. We have 320,000 people in Massachusetts unemployed. Those are real jobs right there. There's going to be construction jobs that come out of those. There'll be an economic boom around those areas, hotels, restaurants, theaters, different areas that around the resort casinos will develop. And when you have someone like Steve Wynn from Las Vegas looking at Massachusetts, looking at bidding in on a license, that tells you that real developers that know how to make first-class resorts think that Massachusetts can sustain a resort casino. We have $1.1 billion leaving the state, so the market exists. And people are playing the lottery here already. They're playing Keno. It's hypocritical for Massachusetts to continue to be a naming state and say, no, you can't gamble here, but play the Mass Lottery, please, and play Keno, please. And then take your $1.1 billion and go give it to Connecticut for them to invest in local aid, in their school systems, and public parks. So I absolutely do support casino, especially resorts. I'm less favorable about the racinos at the tracks. If it was part of the bill as it was in this case, I would have voted for it. But my major problem is that those should be publicly bid. There should not be any handing out of contracts. And unfortunately, that's what was looking like it was going to happen. There was not going to be a bid on those racinos. I think you have to have credibility in the system. You have to have a public bid process. I don't know where else. If you're opposed to the casinos, I don't know how you're going to say no to the hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing into the 15,000, 20,000 jobs it's going to create instantly. It's not a magic wand that's going to fix the Massachusetts economy, but it is one piece where there's a market, clearly there's licensing revenue, and we are having that money spent right now. We're just driving people out of the state to do so. And if we let New Hampshire get to it before us, if we let Vermont get to us, we'll make it that forever that we'll always keep exporting billions of dollars of Massachusetts monies out to other school systems, out to other municipalities, instead of investing in Massachusetts and bringing much needed jobs here.
Okay, thank you.
I completely disagree with Mark in several areas of this. First of all, Sharon, in what year do we have a financial problem? This year, right?
Well, in next year.
In next year, okay. So to turn around and say casino gambling is going to solve our problem today is unrealistic, because there's the time to open a casino is so far down the road it's not even funny. I disagree with Mark on the sense that the market's there. Let's just look at reality. What was the first thing that happened when the vote went down? Suffolk Downs announced they were laying off employees. So if gambling there's a market there for gambling, how come Suffolk Downs isn't doing well? Because people aren't gambling. Just look at the lottery. Lottery revenue's gone down. So they're not making the money. Foxwood and Mohegan Sun both have had huge layoffs this year. 1,500 employees, 10% of their workforce at Foxwood alone. You look at Las Vegas, what's the worst economy in the United States? Las Vegas. So Las Vegas is the worst economy, so that means people aren't gambling, so there's no market for it. The ship on this really has sailed. We should have done this maybe 10 years ago. It would have made sense. Speaking of ships, we had the casino ships that went out of Gloucester and out of Lynn. Those went under. They couldn't make it. So we already showed that people in Massachusetts don't want to do it. I agree with Mark in terms of public policy. If you're going to have slot machines, do it as a public bid. However, that was a sweet idea for the Speaker of the House because that's his district. I understand that. But that's not going to create jobs. I have a friend, a dear friend, that owned a casino in Las Vegas. There's not that many jobs that it creates, particularly slot machines. I mean, it's just not.
I think slots are. We understand.
They don't offer the job. And most of you go onto a cruise ship or down to any casino, even the card, the poker and blackjack, they're all these video dealers. So you don't even have a lot of live dealers. It's all automated. The big issue that I have with it, the state was going to build a technology center down in Fall River. There's no market, nobody wants to invest in it, so that's gone under. one of the things that the governor said is he still wants to do the infrastructure improvements into this parcel of land so that if casino gambling materializes, that a developer want to go in there. With bridges like on 93 down in Southborough that are falling down around the commuters, why would we want to spend taxpayer dollars into a vacant parcel in hopes that someday somebody's going to want to develop that parcel? We have enough infrastructure problems that could use the tax dollars today that still create the same number of jobs to fix the infrastructure that we have today. To turn around and spend money so that a private developer will come in and look at that makes no sense. The other thing, the plan is flawed in saying you want 3 casinos scattered all around the state. Look at any one of them. Atlantic City, Connecticut, Florida, Las Vegas, Utah. All the casinos are congregated in one area. If you're having bad luck at Bellagio, go across the street to the Venetian. You know, they feed off of each other. So to say you're going to put one out in Western Mass, it just won't work. Plus the impact to all of those. You know, when you say that it's going to create jobs, look at the cost to the cities and towns in revenue. You know, police, fire, infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, all those things are going to impact them even more. I'm not saying that it's not something to look at down the road, but in terms of looking at our financial situation today, it just makes no sense.
Sure. If I may, I just have to respectfully disagree with Brian. Just very much on this one. I mean, Brian, you're just talking about all the infrastructure. The licensing on this casinos were hundreds of millions of dollars off the bat. Never mind hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue yearly from these casinos. So we need revenue to help invest into bridges and infrastructure. I mean, here's real money that's on the table. I don't know how you say there's no market, Brian. $1.1 billion are going to Connecticut and Rhode Island today. I mean, the market is there. We can't deny those numbers. And
you can, because it's not all coming from Massachusetts.
So that $1.1 billion is Massachusetts money going into Connecticut and Rhode Island. So the market is clearly there. And yeah, you're right. You know, Foxwoods and what you're going to have done some layoffs, but they still employ over 15,000 people in the worst economy that we've seen. I mean, when times were better, they had over 20,000 employees. And those are still real jobs that are happening today. And you know, you look at Las Vegas, actually isn't the worst economy, but they also have no sales tax, no income tax, some of the lowest electrical bills in the country. So you know, they are top 10 of the worst, but they're not the worst economy. And that's, again, we're taking, for instance, the worst economic times we've seen. Well, here's hoping that there's a recovery along the way, and if we can capitalize on resort-style casinos now, when times get good, we'll continue to grow, bring more revenue, bring more jobs, and continue to expand the area, making it economic center.
The one thing I'd like to touch on, and you did a little bit, and I'll let you start, are social costs if we do have casinos. Are we concerned about that? What do we do? Can we afford it?
Yeah, I think, you know, just to correct it, Las Vegas is the worst. If you go to cnnmoney.com, they're the worst real estate market, and they're also the worst unemployment in the country. And they also have the social impact that has, you know, in terms of police and the fire services that are there. Now, in the heyday, you know, a lot of the casinos ended up putting in, helping the cities and towns with their public safety facilities, but that's not there. Krikorian, who owns the Bellagio, was just building the city, the new casino out there, and it went belly up. He owns all the major casinos out there, and the market's so bad out there that he ended up going under. So, he was building in there the police and the fire, and even a small hospital in that center. So that went under. But the social costs, when you look at Atlantic City, it's been dramatic. I mean, Taj Mahal, which is Donald Trump's property, is in bankruptcy again. So the market, you know, is just not there. And you have a capital problem, you know, people investing. So even if you can get somebody that pays the licensing fee, it's going to be pretty hard for city or town, which is the way that they normally did it in these cities, is they say, okay, if we license you to have a casino with X amount of slot machines and all of this, we think that it's going to impact our police and fire with the ambulance. We need you to contribute to us, you know, another ambulance or money for another fire department, but you're not going to get that kind of money because there's no capital out there. So, I mean, if somebody as rich as Krikorian went under and Donald Trump is in financial trouble as well.
Again.
You got, you want to move that? You've got those problems out there that it's not going to happen, but the social impact's going to be tremendous. And then you have the traffic and the infrastructure, and we all know that Massachusetts, we have some significant traffic issues and infrastructure problems in this area. And that always ends up, when they expanded, the football place down and then got the TD Garden, the Old Boston Garden, the taxpayers ended up picking up the tab for the subway and the roads and all of that stuff. And we don't have that money.
I think always look at social issues and the impacts. There's no doubt about that. And I'm very sensitive to that. But I believe in personal responsibility. And I believe that as someone who's got a family, who has children, who has to provide, to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills, I have to take the responsibility whether I'm going to take this $100 and I'm going to go play it in a casino or whether I'm going to invest it in my home to make sure that I can pay the bills. I'm sick of the government being in any state trying to protect me. Let me be a responsible adult. Let me be responsible for my decisions. And if I want to spend this money, well, that decision is between me and my wife. And if I can't spend that money and I can't afford to spend that money, then I won't. I mean, people smoke, and that's a vice. People gamble, that's a vice. There are people already addicted to the mass lottery, addicted to Keno, and there are outreach programs for that. There are all sorts of addictions: alcohol addiction, drug addiction, tobacco addiction. They exist, and many of them come down to personal responsibility. But there are some structures set up to help people when they have addictions. But at the end of the day, if I'm making a decision as to how I'm going to spend the money, that's my decision to make. And if I really want to spend it, right now I'm driving down to Foxwoods and I'm going to spend it. And $1.1 billion a year is going out of the state, so people are making that decision.
All right, thank you. I want to move on. We'll get back in your closing. We can get back to this issue too. Do you think right now the legislators on Beacon Hill have been spending our money wisely? Times are tough. We send a lot of our income to them, and they dole it out. How do you think they're doing? And we can start with you, Brion.
No.
Well,
they're doing a terrible job. They don't get it. Like I said, they're looking at more and more ways to tax people. They're not focusing on the economy. Last night I was watching a news program and was talking about Washington as well. Everybody's on vacation, and people are losing their homes and losing their jobs, and nobody seems to really care. So, I think on every level of government, people just don't get it. I don't see Beacon Hill. You don't even hear much coming out of there. And the stuff that comes out of there, they're looking at stuff that doesn't matter. The thing that should be the headline every day from the Speaker and the Senate President and the Governor is the economy and jobs and what they can do. You don't hear anything come out of anybody up there about that. So I don't think that they do a good job. And I don't think the government ever does a great job with managing our money. That's why I believe, in personal responsibility, in preserving, allowing you to keep more of your money. Because you know how best to spend that money with you and your family than does somebody up on Beacon Hill. And no matter how much money you ever send to the government, they're going to end up needing more. Because they always want to do I've been there. I understand how Beacon Hill works. And many of the people are well-intentioned, but they don't ever think of the consequences of their actions. And a lot of times, a lot of it's about ego. I'll give you a perfect example of when I was in Beacon Hill before. There was a state rep that was leaving public service. He had done nothing and never put forth a bill in all of his years of being in the House of Representatives. So his way of he wanted to make sure that he was in the history books. So he put in a bill. If you remember years ago, all the DPW vehicles were like orange. Mm-hmm. He put in a bill to change all the vehicles in the DPW to this sort of yellow color. And it passed because the Speaker of the House at the time wanted to help him make sure that the history books remembered him. So he put in this. So then what did the taxpayers end up doing? So it seems a little innocuous for something like that. Silly, if you ask me. So now the state had to go out and repaint all of the vehicles in the DPW so that they were compliant with the law. So they don't think these things through. I think that it's time for Beacon Hill and on politicians, public servants in every level to be honest with the people, say what we can do and we can do well, and what we can't do, and try to help them find private sector solutions.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
And the state absolutely does not spend money wisely. They don't get it. They are living in a fantasy world. You know, while the cities and towns have been cutting back, the town of Billerica, we've suffered state aid cuts, higher assessments from the state, which essentially is just another way of cutting state aid. We've put in hiring freezes. We've lost employees to attrition. We're making cuts locally, and the state has hired 7,500 new employees over the last 4 years. They continue to look at tax first and refuse to look at reforms. There was $1 billion worth of reforms put up in the legislature this year, and the Speaker of the House and the governor wanted nothing to do with them. And the result over the last 4 years has been $1 billion in new taxes. The culture is just so perverted on Beacon Hill. Get as much money as you can out of the taxpayers and continue spending, put our head in the sand and pretend nothing's happening. It can't work anymore, and we're at dire straits now because we have a $2.5 billion deficit walking into next year's budget cycle. Something's going to happen. It's going to have to be reforming the state government. It's going to have to be downsizing the way state government is operating, and it's going to be imperative to get the private sector back working to help bring revenue back into the state. You know, I understand how expensive it is to live in Massachusetts. It takes 2 incomes in my house to pay the bills. You know, we're trying to raise a family, and every time the state is raising taxes, it's making it more difficult for me, for other families, for seniors to live. And I recognize this in Barbara Anderson, Chip Faulkner, Chip Ford over at Citizens for Limited Taxation recognize that I understand this. They've endorsed me as a candidate because I've continually fought for lower taxes, lower fees, trying to make Massachusetts more affordable. And that's what we have to do in state government. We have to get up there, we have to reform the way it works, consolidate, consolidate state agencies, make Massachusetts more affordable for cities and towns, for businesses and for residents.
Okay, thank you. Now, very quickly, and without going on too long, very quickly, what are some differences between you and your opponent?
Well, I think the major differences is the experience. You know, I've been in Beacon Hill, so I understand how it works. I've also been a selectman in the town of Billerica, so I understand the municipal side as well. I have, you look at my website, brionc.org, and you'll see a long list of accomplishments. I think that that's what, you know, respectfully differs the two of us. You know, when I went in as on Beacon Hill, I tackled the reality of the Massachusetts miracle. When you look at the website, you can see some of the things that were done there. When I became a selectman, the town was in the red, and some of the reforms and the changes that we had to make locally in order to do that. You know, I've been there. I've been able to make those hard decisions and get things done. You know, it's not about platitudes and, you know, giving people, and I'm not saying that Marc is doing that, but, you know, it's easy to talk about leadership and all that stuff, but it really, at the end of the day, it's who has the ability to get the job done. Marc's done a great job on the Board of Selectmen, and you know, I applaud him. But I think that when you look at the two of us and you look at who has accomplished more in their career in public service, I think that I clearly, you know, have done those things. And
How about issues, though? I mean, casinos.
Casino's a big thing. You know, I mean, and I'm not, you know, I mean, when I say I'm opposed to it, I'm not opposed to casino gambling. I'm not prude. I mean, I have no problem with looking at casino gambling. I think it has to be realistic. But when you look at casino gambling, I mean, you know, as Marc has talked about in terms of helping our financial problems, I think it's unrealistic. I mean, the legislature proved that, not this fiscal year, but the fiscal year before, because the licensing fees that Marc talks about, they built them into the budget. Well, guess what? Nobody came forward, they didn't legalize it, and they couldn't even get people, even the Mashpee Indians that were looking at getting a casino, they even dropped their bids, you know, their pursuits of those things. So they built a budget anticipating those revenues, but they never materialized. So I just prefer, and I think that it would be refreshing for voters today, for someone to be honest with them and say, okay, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, and look at the reality. As far as, you know, all the issues, I mean, tax-wise and all of that, I think Marc and I, you know, pretty much on board. But this is where the experience, I think, you know, differs us.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think Brion's absolutely right. Experiences and involvement is the absolute difference between us. And again, I'm very familiar with Brion, and I like Brion. But I've been on the Board of Selectmen now for the last 6 years. I've been in town meeting for longer than that now. I've been involved today into the community. Brian has been a state rep. He was a state rep for 1 term, and he left that office to go run for Senate. So, you know, yeah, you had a couple years up on Beacon Hill, but it was 20 years ago. I know what's going on in the town today. When power plant was threatened on up in North Billerica, I was there standing with the residents. I was taking on Harvard professors in town hall and standing with the neighborhoods to protect their interests. I've been standing with neighborhoods fighting 40Bs. I've been fighting to keep fees down and taking a beating from my fellow board members to try to keep water rates down and to keep different fees in town down. I've been fighting the town meeting floor on the Board of Selectmen for the last 6 years to keep taxes down, to try to be fiscally responsible. So experience is very different. I've been in the neighborhoods. I'm working with residents. I know what's going on today. And Brian hasn't been involved for the last decade. I've been involved today. I think that is a difference.
Okay. Well, what we want to do now is give you each 2 minutes to wrap up. You can say whatever you'd like, focus on a specific issue, a couple of issues, tout your experience, but it's your time. So you can start, Brian.
Okay. Just to correct the record, you don't have to have a title in order to understand what's going on with government. You just have to log onto the computer, pick up a paper, watch public meetings, and you pretty much know. I've been involved since I was 18. Served in town meeting, I was the president of the Historical Society, several civic organizations. I served in the House of Representatives, and I served in the I know the reality of what's going on. I deal with people every day. I've been walking neighborhoods all summer long talking to people and hear their concerns. In my capacity, my work, private sector jobs, I deal with the public all the time. So I know exactly what's going on. So just because I don't have a title doesn't mean that I'm not in touch. I do know that, experience matters and honesty matters. When you look at what I've done over my public career, you can go in and you can look at where the tax cuts were made. You can look at where budgets have been cut. You look at the town of Billerica budget, you can talk about saying that it breaks down to leadership. If you can't, I was the only Republican on a board of 5 members and I was able to get things done. Marc enjoys having 3 other people that he's friendly with, another Republican that's on the board, and the budget has consistently gone up by 3%. So you can just see that you can talk about things, but it's actually what you get done. Build a children's playground, cut the budget, cut taxes, reopen the fire station, got the sewer program back on track, got closed the budget gap in Billerica and on Beacon Hill in my career. Cut taxes when I was on Beacon Hill, cut taxes when I was local to the Board of Selectmen. Created economic zones when Raytheon moved out of Billerica. I fought with the unions, the Purity Supreme, to try to keep the jobs here and was able to delay them moving up to Vermont. I went as far as getting Governor Weld and Secretariat Chris Morris to come down to Billerica and work with the unions to do it. So I have real experience, real accomplishments, and I feel that, while I like Marc personally, I think when you look at our backgrounds and what we've been able to accomplish and our leadership skills, you'll see that there is a difference between us, and that Brion Cangiamila, I'm asking for you to vote for me, Brion Cangiamila, on September 14th.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Marc?
Thank you. I've been on the Board of Selectmen for the last 6 years. I've been in town meeting for longer. And I have very intimate knowledge of what's going on with Billerica. These experiences have helped prepare me to be a state representative in this upcoming election. As a father of 2 and a husband, I understand how difficult it is to raise a family in Massachusetts, how expensive it is to live. I understand that tax increases hurt families and hurt senior citizens. I have a very vested interest, the interest of my children and their generation, and to turning around Massachusetts. And I represent residents and taxpayers of Billerica 100% of the time, not leadership, not the Speaker of the House. I've been a strong voice for the taxpayers throughout my tenure on the Board of Selectmen. I've consistently voted for lower taxes. I've consistently made attempts to keep budgets down. And many times you can look up in the little sun. I've been the minority on a 4-to-1 vote, but I've never hesitated to vote my conscience and the conscience of the taxpayers. I'm very proud of my record in helping bring businesses to town. EMD Serrano and Vera Fuel Cells, Paraxel, Farmalucents. We've created economic target areas. We've tried to bring businesses and jobs into Billerica and bring revenue into Billerica, and we need to do that up on Beacon Hill. I've shown dedication to the taxpayers. He never hesitated to know where I stood on an issue. I've stood with neighborhoods. I've stood up against 40Bs. I've fought power plants and the establishment that comes with that. I've helped condo owners when excuse me, when town services were threatened. I've stood up on town meeting floor to fight for funding to make sure that public safety members were properly protected with the right equipment. Despite having an in-family home, I've given up this time. I consider it an honor to serve the town of Billerica, and I think I can do a great job up on Beacon Hill, continuing fighting. I've been a strong voice for taxpayers. I am a proven leader, and I want to be a leader on Beacon Hill. So I ask for your vote on the primary September 14th. My name is Marc Lombardo. My website is marclombardo.com. Please check it out, and I ask for your vote.
Okay, thank you both very much for joining us today. Again, they're both running for the state representative for the 22nd Middlesex District, and they're on the Republican primary ballot. And we at the Sun are asking you all to please get out and vote on September 14th. Thank you.